All right. We are live. I know we went live a little bit early, but I wanted to give some people a chance to join, get the notification if you attended live. If you are catching the replay, then you can probably skip a minute or two because we're just going to be waiting here to the top of the hour to start our conversation. But we are so excited because a bunch of you had chosen to attend, and a lot of the people that will be attending we used to work with. So Jess and I used to work at Slalom Consulting together, and we've got some people that are very supportive of us and our talk today. So I'm very excited to dive into that. But
Yeah, I was going to say, leave it to two ex-consultants to be like, let's make sure we're on a couple minutes early and do a tech check and make sure everything's working.
exactly. You cannot take the consultant out of either of us. It's like so ingrained after so many years. I mean,
Yep.
I still am deep in the spreadsheets and PowerPoints. I mean, you can't even though you can like escape the title, I suppose.
Yeah.
The root, the core of a consultant is
Still
always
in us.
be there. Yeah, the essence.
The
Mhm.
essence.
So, yeah. Anyway, we're at the top of the hour, so want to dive in and get started. We're gonna do some brief intros, just to let you know. I'm sure people who are watching probably know at least one of us, but maybe not the other. So we'll do some intros. We're gonna get into designing your dream life first, and then picking your job and having your job further enhance that dream life. We're going to share after that some possibilities. So just get the juices, the creative juices flowing. We'll share some of our own stories of what we have done in our lives to put our life and our values first. And then we will share some very actionable tips. We want you to walk away with this with some very easy baby steps to start this process,
Yeah.
because it is a process. It's not something that just happens overnight, but it's so important to just take those baby steps and keep taking actions towards that goal. And then we'll end with some Q&A. So let's get started. I want to first just say that this is the very first of this weekly series live show on LinkedIn that I'm doing. And I'm so excited to be joined by Jess Felt. I'll let you introduce yourself. And yeah, would love to hear, of course, about your business, but also, we're talking about life. So if you can share a little bit about what Jess as a whole is like, that would be awesome.
Absolutely. And I feel very honored to be your first weekly guest for your LinkedIn Live. So happy to be here. I am Jess Felt, and I am a life and leadership coach, and I specifically work with working parents. And so, really, I support working parents, everything at the intersection of career and family. So, whether that's you're a brand new working parent and you're trying to figure out the whole maternity, paternity leave thing, paid leave, whether you're trying to figure out how to go back into the office as a working parent, whether you're trying to decide, do I even want this career anymore now that my life has shifted and evolved so much and I have new priorities, really everything at that intersection. And I came into this because of my own journey through that. So you mentioned, like, who is Jess as a whole? I am an ex-consultant. That's where Susie mentioned we met at Slalom Consulting. I have two young boys. I have a 5-year-old and an almost 3-year-old. So we'll be starting kindergarten in a couple weeks. And that's like a really big deal for us. I'm based out of Chicago. I've been here for 20 years almost, which is kind of crazy, but I'm originally from Southern California. And so everyone's like, why the heck did you move here from Southern California? But I think I've now lived in Chicago longer than I lived in California. So I can officially consider myself a Midwestern girl, I think now.
Wow. Well, I used to be a Midwestern girl and now I live in Denver. So I was in Chicago for, yeah, about 18 years. And just last year, coming up on our 1-year anniversary here in Denver, I have a 3-year-old boy as well. And my business is Carpe Diem Traveler. I help people live abroad for a month. So that could be for a sabbatical, which we'll be sharing more about today. If you can't take a full month off, I fully support maybe splitting that up and doing a sabbatical or taking maybe a couple weeks off, however much you can. And then if you have the flexibility to do some remote work abroad, then, I think that that's an opportunity that's becoming more and more possible. I guess that's one thing that we can thank COVID for. But I think that that opens up a lot of doors and some flexibility that maybe you didn't have in the past. But I started my business in 2016, and I've helped hundreds of people travel all over the world, planning, your typical vacations. And now, as of this year, I'm fully focused on trips that are a month or longer because I have a passion for it. And I'll be sharing a little bit more later about taking my year-long sabbatical with my husband. And we're actually nearing the 10-year anniversary at the end of August. We left 10 years ago. And I've taken some other sabbaticals as well. So, and a lot of that most of that was during my corporate consulting job. So,
crazy that you said that's 10 years. That means we've known each other for 10 years.
Yes, I know. Time goes very, very fast. Hi, Lisa. Thanks for joining. And, it's insane to think that it's been 10 years, but that was honestly the moment that I realized, okay, I need to do things differently. And I think we'll talk a little bit more about like what a sabbatical and taking time off can provide in your life and how you can use that to kind of steer your future and mold how you create that life that you are super passionate about. So let's get into it. And I was trying to think about a way to kick off our conversation about how to, really mold and design that life first and then work. And the analogy that popped into my brain was and most people have heard it, so I'll give a very shortened version of the professor that has the jar and then the rocks and pebbles and sand. And of course you can, if you put the rocks in first and then, the smaller stones and then the sand, everything fits. But if you try to like dump the sand in first, then like those big rocks are just not going to fit. And I was thinking back to, let's rewind to, our big career decisions when we are like 20 something years old. The biggest rock of your life at that point is work. I mean, that is like what you are doing.
Mm-hmm.
But then you add in, maybe you find a partner, maybe you have kids and the house and all of these other things. These are all big rocks. And, maybe they don't all fit into that jar anymore. And the thing is that so many people just are living on autopilot and don't really want to make any changes or shifts. They recognize, the stress and like things are just not working, not fitting the way that they want to, because it requires change. And I thought that would be a good place to start, because I know you help a lot of people, especially with those big life events, like having a child, for example. This may be one of the biggest changes in your life, and you help people through that. So I'd love to hear, how do you work with clients? How do you help them through the big transition and just like figuring out like, how does work fit into all of this anymore?
Yeah, I think that's such a great metaphor to talk about, because you're right. When we're in our early 20s, when we're coming out of college, the biggest thing in our life at that time is career. And so we dive into that, and then we think everything else around that. And then as we continue to go on in life and we continue to evolve, new things come in, whether that's a partner, whether that's starting a family and different things. And there's that tension, as you say, of like, this doesn't seem to fit anymore. Maybe my big rocks aren't my big rocks anymore. Maybe they're the smaller ones and there's new big rocks. And to
Mhm.
be able to reevaluate that is kind of scary because that's really all you've known up until then. For many I work primarily with working mothers. For many working mothers, especially now, we've spent 10, 15 years developing our careers with that as the main primary rock, if
Mhm.
you will. And then all of a sudden, when we have a family come along, it's like, oh, maybe my values have shifted. Maybe my priorities are shifted. And I need to like shake out the jar and remove or put new rocks in or start from a different perspective. And that can be really scary. It can also be really overwhelming because it's kind of an identity change for so many people, such a giant transition like that.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so that's really where I start with working with my clients is getting really clear up front. What are those biggest values for you? What are those biggest priorities for you? Where you are right now? And it's okay if they're different of where they used to be, but let's make sure we're really clear on what they are now so that you feel like you have a good direction, kind of like a North Star to go from when you are making these really big decisions about what you want your life to look like now.
Mhm. Absolutely. And that's honestly the first step in my process too, because the way I work with clients is I mean, there's a lot of overlap. I'm just using the sabbatical or the time away from your physical home and all of your routines and everything to kind of shake things up. And but it's so important to do that intentionally. So I have an exercise that I work with my clients to help them define, what are your goals? What do you want to get out of this? Because I think that if you can take that time for yourself to get the clarity on what you want out of your life, then using some simple exercises to figure out how do I want to use this time, because it's really a gift. I mean, yes, it's very normal to take 1 or 2 weeks vacation, but usually that's just focused on like the travel itself. It's not,
Right.
deeply introspective or anything like that. Usually it can be. But I think that's the big difference between, or one of the big differences between a vacation and then taking, a sabbatical or, some form, even if there's a workcation involved. I think it's a tool to be able to take a step away from your day to day life and routines and everything that all that noise that's going on in your head, to be able to get that clarity on what you want. Because I'm sure so many people you work with, it's like, okay, well, I know something's not working, but I don't know what I want. And
Right.
that's the hardest thing. I mean, I know being there, I've been there, and okay, well, I know this isn't working, but if I don't know what I want, then I can't go and do that. And so, my thing is using a sabbatical as a way to help you get that clarity. Because I know whenever I've taken a sabbatical, and I've taken several month-long sabbaticals, so it is possible to do that in a month, that has given me not only clarity around what I want, because I'm just removed from the normal life, so I
Yeah.
have some time and space to think bigger. And it's also given me confidence, because doing something like that is not something that's super typical. It is a challenge, and I recognize that, and I help people through that. But I think that by doing something, like taking a 1 month sabbatical, you are proving to yourself that you can do it, and you can like live life a little bit differently. Like at a minimum, it's like turning off that autopilot
Yeah.
for your life for a moment, to be able to think bigger and, maybe do some course correction.
Yeah.
If the way and the direction that you are tracking is not what you want.
Right. That space to be able to create, to be reflective about it is really important in the intentionality of
Mhm,
it.
mhm,
Something that I come across a lot with my clients is they're feeling in that point of tension And it almost feels like anything related to the current state is bad, right? I need to go somewhere else. I need to different industry. I have to jump ship. I have to go to somewhere else. And sometimes when we just have more of that space to be able to heal from some of that burnout, or to be able just to be like, okay, I have space to think, to be really intentional about what I want now. You maybe don't have to do a complete 180. There's ways to kind of create more of that fulfillment, that contentment, the life you want where you are now. But as you say, if you're continuing to go on autopilot, it feels like I either can't even think about it, or I need to completely run away from it.
Yeah.
One thing that we haven't mentioned yet is that my husband and I also took a 3-month sabbatical, which is one of the things that we bonded over originally, before we had kids. And at the time when we took it, my husband had quit his job and was like, I'm getting out of the industry. I'm completely changing course. I just need to be out of it.
Mm-hmm.
After our sabbatical, he's like, you know what? I don't think I need to change industries anymore. I don't think I need to do this. He just needed to heal from some burnout, and he needed space to kind of be able to like reconnect with himself. And he decided, no, I can go back into it. I'm going to find a new job, but I can stay in the same industry. I can stay in the same function. I just needed some space and time away. And for me, it did the opposite. For me, I was like, you know what? No, I'm ready to dive into something else. Like that space created more of an intention, as you said, confidence, to be able to say, like, I don't feel like I'm making a reactive decision. I've taken that time and space to be really intentional about this decision. So for both of us, it did two very different things with our careers, but the space that we created was the key to that.
Yes, completely. So after the 1-year sabbatical that my husband and I took, I took a leave of absence from the consulting company that I was working for, and I returned back to my job. And honestly, and most people are like, oh, like what happened? It's like, it was a blip. I mean, I went right back into it. No big deal. However, the desire to do something more travel related definitely built. So I ended up starting my business as a side hustle. But that was like a couple years later. So it was just something that I kind of stewed on, but I don't think that I would have made that leap if I didn't take the leap to do the sabbatical first, because that is what showed me I can do different things. Cause I mean, again, I'm especially growing up, I was like, by the book, I'm going to get good grades. I'm going to get into a good school. I'm going to get the good job, blah, blah, blah. Like living life as, you're supposed to. Mm-hmm. And this was that first like big departure from that. And I realized, okay, I can do that. I can figure it out. So it gave me that confidence to take those big leaps. For my husband, after he came back, he didn't have, long story short, the company he was working for got acquired. So he was going to be out of like having to find a new job anyway. I just told him, do you want to find a new job now or later? And eventually, and this is a topic that I think I will be another live, is like, how did we get to the later? Because it was a journey to get there. It was not an immediate, yes, Susie, that's a great idea. Let's do it. And so he chose later, and then he ended up completely changing industries. So, it's one of those things that giving yourself the gift of time and space to reflect. And, we work for at least, I mean, most of us will work for a solid 40 plus years. And if you don't ever take some time for yourself, like you're just going to keep going in the same direction that you're going. And if you're not happy with that direction, then something needs to change. And you might not know what that something is, but I think one really, maybe not the only way, but definitely a very solid tactic is to give yourself that gift of time to reflect and, also do some fun things. Get some more freedom and adventure in your life, like a 1 to 2 week vacation that we've just, as a society, accepted. Well, from a North American perspective,
right?
Accepted. Definitely in Europe, they're off like their month
the entire month of August,
right? And like, but that's
later.
Exactly. But it's like we haven't done that. But for 40 years, if you have like a 1 week of adventure, I mean, sure, you probably have some like long weekends or whatever, but like for certain people like myself, that definitely is not enough to
Right.
fill my cup. Because one of my values and the things that lights me up is going and exploring. And, that's what like really gets me going, and gets, me more creative. And, there's so many things, so many benefits of travel. And I know many people want more of it, but it's just like, but how? I can't
Right.
do that. And there's all these excuses that pop up, that will, if you let them, then that's the end of the conversation, right? Instead of thinking about like, how could you do that? And, if the question is just like a yes or no answer, then you're not going to get very far. But
Right.
if you think more creatively about how, and, for a lot of people, it's money, and they're thinking, okay, well, let's say I usually take a 1 or 2 week vacation every year. And now you're telling me like, go take a month. They're automatically like, okay, Susie, like great idea. But if you do it in a way that like I recommend, which is more like slow travel, find a home base, really dig in, because that's the difference about the
Yeah.
time is like you have more time to like dig in and like find a new home. That's usually about the same cost as a 1 or 2 week vacation.
Yeah. And that's something that when we think back, this idea of like design your life first and then your design your career was really a part of my journey and my husband's journey. A part of this as well is something that we know that's really important to us as a family is experiences over things and spaciousness. And
Mhm.
so that's really led to the creation of the way that we've designed our life around our careers. One, that I own my own business, so I can be really flexible so that
Mhm.
we can, we love to travel with our kids. We're doing our own month abroad next summer that we're planning for, and
Yes.
thinking about really intentionally how we've created our careers to be able to allow us to do that, because that's what's really important to us as a family. And so even when we think about it, okay, well, if this is something that's really important to us a year down the line to be able to do this for a month, how does that reflect in the decisions and the choices that we're making now? Okay, well, let's maybe not go and do and spend this really big thing because we know we want to do this. Oh, well, that also means we're not putting our kids in summer camp, which is crazy expensive. So, like, that's actually okay that we're going to go live abroad for a month because our kids aren't going to be in daycare or summer camp. And
Mhm.
so it's just really a part of like the intentional decision making that we make as a family that doesn't just involve our life, but also thinks about how do our careers that we are choosing fit into that, and make it more accessible to us to be able to really live those values that we have as individuals, but then as a family.
Mhm. And that, I think you bring up a really good point about thinking of the family sabbatical, because that is a different level. There's just the more people, the
The
more
more people, the more little beings.
right, right. But I think there's a couple different points here. I mean, one is around uh the urgency to do this, not like you need to do this immediately, but thinking again, if you know take that high level view of your life, their childhood is finite, and it honestly only gets more complicated to do something like this as the kids get older. They will get their own things, especially once they like hit like high school and
Right.
tons of activities, things like that. So it may feel like you've got all the time in the world and that's something you can do later, but I think taking advantage of especially young kids, especially before they're in school, but even if they are in school, you've clearly got the summer where you don't have to worry about education, although there's definitely education options, even if you do want to take them out of school, if you have that flexibility. But so yeah, I mean, I think thinking big picture about like what do you want for those however many years, prior to them leaving, and going off to college. And yes, you could do this when they're adult children too, but
Totally.
that's like way further down the line. But like thinking more about like think about this next year and how can you find a time to do that. I think it's a really good challenge, and a thought exercise, because there's never going to be a perfect time. there's only going to be, but you have to create the time.
Yeah.
I mean, and that obviously applies to so many things, but you have to be the one to say, this is a priority. I want to do this. Outline like why you're doing it and the intentions around it and how this is going to benefit, you and your family, what memories it's going to give you. And, I can guarantee you've probably never regretted any kind of like vacation that you have taken, right? So this is just like a little bit bigger than that. But, I think that it's really about, especially when kids are involved. Yes, it's a little bit more complicated, but it's also more rewarding. And another thing that I hear is like, oh, well, there's no childcare, and it won't be a vacation, like parenting in another location. It's vacation, those memes.
I've been there. I've done that. There's also ways. There's
ways.
Also other ways to do it.
Totally. And that's one of the pre-submitted questions. I think I'll touch on that a little bit. But before we get to that, I want to share some of our recommended first steps that you can take towards designing that life that you want first. So I'll have you go. What do you recommend people do first?
Yeah. I mean, I really think the first step is getting clarity in what your values are today, both as an individual and if you're part of a couple or a family unit, what those values and priorities are as a family unit. And I mean, obviously this is what I do, so I'm going to say, but like seek out help to do it if you feel like that's what's required for the accountability and to create the space, because it really is so easy to get caught up in the day to day and be like, oh yeah, I'll do that. Oh yeah, we'll do that. Oh, we'll have that conversation. And then you never do it, either because the conversation feels so big and so overwhelming, or everything else just becomes the higher priority right now. Right. And so really being able to say like, no, we think this is so important. We're going to intentionally create that space. We're going to hold ourselves accountable to doing this so that we can live with more intention. We can design our life. We can feel better about the career we're stepping into because it supports everything else around us. That really is the step one, just getting so clear on what those values are and what those priorities are. It creates that North Star. So it doesn't just feel like, oh, I could do this, but you have some intention around the direction that you're going.
Mm-hmm. What are some examples, like the clients that you work with, what are some of the examples that pop up as like their top values? Because I think just like an open-ended, like, what are your values? It can feel really overwhelming, but like hearing some examples, I think might
So I can give an example for our family. For me individually, one of my biggest values is freedom too, which is why I made the switch to own my own business, because I really value having the freedom to choose the work I want to do, choose who I work with, and the flexibility over my time. As a family, something that's really valuable to us, and I think I mentioned this earlier, is spaciousness. And so that's also one of the things that drove us to say, okay, I'm going to own my own business. But I'm only going to work 2/3 time. Like I don't ever want to work full time, because having the spaciousness for me to be able to do other things and pick up the kids so that on weekends we can really value our time as a family and do more experiences as a family. And my husband makes similar decisions with his career. Those are some examples that lead us to make really intentional decisions with what we do with our time.
That's awesome. Perfect examples. I would say for me, the recommended first step is similar, more of a brainstorming exercise. So sit down, piece of paper, pen, and just, hypothetically, if you had a month, what would you do with that time? And just set a timer, like 10-15 minutes, just like write and do not judge what comes up, because some things might pop up. And that's why I recommend doing this with like physically with a pen and paper, to see some things might pop up in your head that you're like, where did that come from? And what I mean by don't judge is like, let's say it's a month in Italy. Your first thought after that might be like, well, that's too expensive. We can't do that. And then like all the reasons why, like purely just like very hypothetically, you're not necessarily doing it, but just think about what could be possible.
Right.
And, go through that list and kind of see like, what are the things that really light you up and excite you? Because those are the things that you're going to want to prioritize. And that's what's going to fuel you to actually take action towards making that happen in your life and not just waiting for retirement.
Right.
So that's what I would recommend. So really very, very similar.
Yeah. One of the question starters that I might add to yours, Susie, that I love is how might we? Right.
Mhm.
So it's like, oh, I really want to go to Italy. And you're judging, oh, I can't do Italy. It's too expensive. Well, how might we do Italy?
Yes.
How might we do this? And it just reframes the question in a way that you're looking at possibilities versus just this yes, no, can we, can't we?
Absolutely. Awesome. So we've got a couple minutes left for, we got one question that was pre-submitted. That's a really good one. And I'm sure a lot of you probably have this question, which is how I really want to travel more. How can I take a sabbatical or workcation when one partner can't work remotely? So in this scenario, her husband, she has the flexibility to work remotely, but her husband cannot. And they have a little one, also a 3-year-old. So 3-year-olds all around. And I think that my number one advice is like, don't wait until sometime when he might possibly have a remote job. Like, I don't even know if that's on the radar, although that is a possibility, further down the line. If your family values is, flexibility, and if you want to do this, more and more long-term, then yes, that might be the answer, is to get a job that has more flexibility to work remotely. But in the meantime, based on your current situation, I do think that if, let's say, you want to take a month, you do, and maybe he can stretch out like 2 weeks, let's say. I feel like that's kind of like a average acceptable in the US time. So then with the other 2 weeks, you can still stay in whatever the destination is. And then it's a matter of thinking creatively. So you could get, maybe your parents, like the kids' grandparents, to come and meet you, or a friend. Maybe your kid goes back with your husband, and you've got you can eat, pray, love, whatever. Even if you do have to work remotely, like, there is something to be said about, and I know that that's like probably shocking to most people to be like, wait, I could do that, because of the mom guilt, right?
Right.
And I got, you might not want to be gone for that long, but maybe grandparents come for a week and then you have a week on your own, or like a friend comes and meet. Like, you can mix match however you want. But I do think that if this is something you really want to do, and you build a case around that, and how you would use that time, you are still important. And that's so hard, especially as a mom, to remember that you have your own identity that is not mom. And it's so rare to get a chance to reconnect with that person and that identity that is not just mom. So you are important. And, I would challenge you to think creatively and figure out a way to make that work, within the next year. Like, I think I'm big on figure out how to make it work in the next year. And it might be baby steps, like I just kind of shared, but then maybe like next year or 2 years from now, you do like both take a full family sabbatical.
Yeah.
But you could have some time to work through it. But I think that in the meantime, you get so much value by doing this thing that you really desire. Because I know she really wants it. But it's just hard to see how it all fits together.
Yeah. And it goes back to that question, right? Like, how might we make this work? Well, how might we? And then you get the creative juices thinking in a different way that way, where it's just like, well, we can't, my husband can't do it. Or, oh, I can't do this. Well, how might we?
Yes, that's so powerful and simple. But I think it's just a different way to reframe, turns something from just like a problem or an excuse into, what are the possibilities? Because it's like, we're all just like kind of, it's a game really, where you can figure out, okay, if I do want this thing, even if I don't have full clarity about what that is, I know I have a desire in me, which you should fulfill. And then it's just a matter of like solving for each of those little like challenges that come up. And the more you open your mind to how might we do that, the solutions will come to you.
Right.
So awesome. I would love, I think that that is it. Unless, do you have any closing thoughts or anything else that you want to share?
No, I would love to say if there are people here who are watching who do not follow me or would like to know where to find me. I'm here on LinkedIn, also on Instagram, and my website is www.justfeltcoaching.com. And if this is something that you're like, I love this idea of creating a different life, of creating a life for my family that's more fulfilling. I don't really see how that fits in with my career now, but I would love to explore those options. Like, let's have a conversation, because there is nothing more, I don't even know the word, like fulfilling doesn't even feel like enough, just to feel like I love the career that I have, but I also love the life that I've created outside of it.
Right. How do you get more of that?
Yeah.
It's like, I think most people are starting with like a decent set level of satisfaction, but they know it could be even better.
Yeah.
So awesome. Well, that was my last question to you. So you answered that. And for anybody who is watching that is interested in living abroad for a month, reach out to me here on LinkedIn or at Carpe Diem Traveler. Oh, I have my Carpe Diem mug here.
I love that.
So Carpe Diem Traveler 1L on Instagram. So just send me a DM and we can get started and just figuring out how might we take a sabbatical.
Mm-hmm.
So awesome. It was such a pleasure, Jess. Thank you so much for your time. And I hope you have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.